So you want to know how to wildcard, when to wildcard, and most importantly, why to wildcard. Well, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Pitwall, your stop for fantasy Formula One content. I'm Jay Jack, and let's go. First thing we want to review is a sub bank. You are allotted 3 substitutions for free in between every single race. If you want to use more than 3, you can do a total of 6, but those last 3 will cost you negative 10 points per sub. Of course, making subs will grow your team value, which allow you to afford better drivers over time. And here we are to the wild card. This is allowed twice per season. One's activated before the summer break, and one is activated after the summer break. And here you're allowed to have 12 free substitutions. And why would you want to have 12 free substitutions? Perhaps you want to get a better team. You're stuck in a hole, you need to catch up in points, or maybe you want a driver that you can't afford to switch. I'll give you an example with my team. The only major difference between these two teams is who I turboed. If I had been turboing Norris instead of Perez for team 1, they'd probably be the same. So I dropped Perez, picked up Leclerc, but for team 2, I wanted to try out picking up drivers that were going to raise the value, and that is perhaps one of the biggest reasons why people would want to use their wildcard is to increase your value. I will share with you now my Google Sheet. It's what I've been building from the ground up. And I have this new tab called Rank, where you're able to see all the data in comparative analysis. Under the price change header, there are only 4 drivers that have increased in price over the course of the season. And if you had Leclerc, Tsunoda, Norris, and Verstappen, you would have raised by over $2 million. And if you have those drivers, good job. If you're trying to get those drivers, a wildcard would be good before they get even more expensive. Now for 3 constructors, they have also increased in value, Ferrari being the most of them. And the other reason why you would want to use a wildcard is to take advantage of streaks. Coming over to the streaks header, you will see that drivers need to get 5 before they will get their bonus points. For a constructor, they only need 3, and everything that's highlighted in blue with orange tells you that these 3 teams, McLaren, Mercedes, and Ferrari, are about to get their bonus streaks. Ferrari would get 10 if they can get 2 in the top 10 for the race. Mercedes will get 5 points if they can get 2 in the top 10 for qualifying, and McLaren can get 5 and 10 for a total of 15 if they can do top 10 for both qualifying and the race. We've only had 2 races so far, and so this goes to show you that these 3 teams are perhaps the strongest, and you're going to want one of these 3 teams for your streak bonuses. And if you don't have those 3 teams, perhaps you want to get a wild card so you can pick them up. Here is an infographics tab that I have that shows the cost to points comparison for the constructors. Mercedes is only 6 points ahead of Red Bull, which is only 10 points ahead of McLaren, which is 15 points ahead of Ferrari. So you can see these top 3 teams, depending on how you're able to balance out your drivers, are giving comparable points. Now looking on to the points comparison, you get to see that Red Bull has the highest average position, but is usually losing 1 position. But Mercedes is averaging position 5, but losing 6 positions. McLaren is averaging position 5, but gaining 3. And Ferrari averaging position 6, but gaining 2. So you can see under the position comparison, this gives you some information to say who is going to be good for getting your race streaks and making sure that they are a value to your team. The same thing can be said for drivers. If you're wanting to pick up drivers, you can look at their cost point comparison and their position comparison. And I will put the link to the spreadsheet in the description below. But enough of data analysis. Let's get back to why we would want to use a wild card. Because you want to increase your team value. A higher team value is likely to get you better points. Let's look at the value between these 2 teams. Team 1, I've only made 1 substitution the entire season. That was for dropping Perez to pick up Leclerc. Perez is a good option, but he is dropping in value a lot. So I wanted to pick up Leclerc before he became too expensive. The value of Team 1 is 101.1 million. I'm above the 100 million cap. Team 2 is at 101.2 million. And the reason why I did a wild card, even though the teams were very similar price values, because I'm trying to use Team 2 to see how high I can go. And this brings us to when do you want to use your wild card? For you, it's got to be the right time. Usually you want it to be right after a race finishes, so it gives you more time for day trading. Day trading is where you pick up drivers or drop them right before their value increases or decreases so you can get the upswing. And if you've got 12 substitutions, like for example Team 2, I've got got 5 left, but I was using that to get my upswing in my team value. Then you also want to use your wildcard when there's more time between races. Most races are 2 weeks apart. Some of them are only 1 week apart, and so you want to make sure that you have the time to use your wildcard. Don't use a wildcard and then suddenly forget, because if you don't use your substitutions, they're gone. And then lastly, you want to keep in mind, when are the most people trading? Let me share with you what is under the summary page. It has a lot of stats, but the one that we're looking at right here is most turbo driver plays. 4.6 million turbos. Well, there's been 2 races, so you divide that in half, which means that there is roughly 2.3 million teams in Fantasy Formula 1. Keep that in mind, because then we look to see how many wild cards have been played. If there's north of 2 million teams, and after race number 1, when everyone realized, oh wow, my team needs better work, only 10,000 wild cards were played. That is 0.43% of all teams did a wild card. Right now, right before the 3rd race of the season in Portugal, there is a little north of 4,000 wild cards that have been used as of right now, and that is 0.18%. So if you are wanting to use a wild card, what you could do is keep an eye on when is a vast majority of the teams in the league using a wild card, because the more teams that are using wild card means the more drivers are going to be traded in and out, which is going to bring us back to our Google Sheet. On the rank tab, you want to go to the section that's called picked. I'm highlighting it right here. As you can see, under picked, Norris, 60% of all teams have him, but he's also one of the top traded in drivers at 22%. Pay attention to when are drivers suddenly going into teams, because that's when their price is going to increase. Leclerc, who's raised a bunch, he has a 23% trade-in rate. Now you can see that some of these drivers have negative, and so if you see a driver that's suddenly being traded out, recognize that his value is going to go down, which now brings us back to my team. I want to leave you with my strategy. I'll put in the link in the description below the first half of the wildcard experience from last week. But team number 2, as you can see, there is a 99% sentiment for Verstappen. He's going to probably raise by 0.1 million. 99% for Norris. Leclerc 66. Gasly 86. Russell 78. These drivers are increasing, and McLaren already raised for me since last week. My goal this week is to have a $0.4 million increase. As of right now, I had 1, and then I have a potential of 2, 3, and between these ones I might get my 4th. And why this is important is because last week I was 0.1 million off from being able to afford Sainz instead of Russell, and so now that I had McLaren go up 1, I can pick him up. My goal over the next 2 to 3 races is actually to raise by $2 to $3 million in value. If you're averaging $0.5 million increase each race, I could potentially get that over the next couple weeks. And why that's important is because I'm looking at this position right here. Russell, even though his value hasn't changed over the season, it might increase before next race, he has not been giving a lot of points. I want to pick up a driver that's going to be even more expensive than Russell. Looking at the price of these drivers, you will notice that Sainz, who I can now afford, and I'm going to pick up after Russell raises up his 0.1 million, is 34 points. Russell is not close in that sort of production value, but who I eventually want to be able to afford with 2 to 3 million more is Ricciardo. See how he has 2 in his qualifying streak and 2 in his race streak? You're going to want to get as many drivers that are going to get these race streak bonuses and these qualifying streak bonuses as you can over the course of the season. Now you might say, why? Ricciardo's dropping in price. Well, that's because I want to pick up Ricciardo when he's cheaper. And if he continues to drop price, then that means it's easier for me to pick him up. And if McLaren continues to be as strong as they are, then he will eventually get his race streak bonus. People are going to want him that week, and then he's going to raise up in value. And there you have it, a how-to guide for why, how, and when, as well as the strategy of using a wild card. For more content like this, you can sub and subscribe to the Pitwall. And until next time, I'll see you on the Pitwall.